The Art of Seduction is a provocative guide that explores the timeless power of charm, persuasion, and manipulation in human relationships. Framed as both a historical analysis and a practical handbook, the book categorizes seductive personalities into archetypes like the siren, the rake, the charmer, and the coquette, among others. Greene draws from stories of famous seducers, from Cleopatra to Casanova to illustrate how seduction can be a tool for influence, power, and personal gain. It's not just about romance. It's about how people can use allure and strategy to control social dynamics, navigate politics, and achieve their goals. The tone is darkly philosophical, bordering on Machiavellian, offering both tactics and warnings about the seductive dance between desire and power. About the author. Robert Greene is an American author known for his deep dives into power dynamics, strategy, and human behavior. With a background in classical studies and a fascination with history and philosophy, Greene crafts his books by blending historical anecdotes with psychological insight. He gained international fame with the 48 Laws of Power, and followed it up with titles like The Art of Seduction, The 33 Strategies of War, and Mastery. His writing style is bold, unapologetic, and often controversial, challenging readers to confront the often unspoken rules that govern influence, manipulation, and ambition in personal and professional life. Once upon a time, in a world not so far from our own, people danced in invisible patterns of attraction, power, and desire. Every glance held a message, every smile a promise, every silence a secret. In this world, there were those who understood how to move through the crowd like mist, captivating others not by force, but by allure. These individuals, knowingly or not, possessed something rare, a seductive presence that stirred something deep within others, making hearts flutter and minds dream. Seduction was not just about love or lust, it was about influence. It was about weaving a web so finely spun that others walked into it willingly, craving what the seducer seemed to offer. Throughout history, such figures existed in many forms. Cleopatra, with her enchanting voice and mysterious beauty, could bend powerful rulers to her will. Casanova, the charming wanderer, understood how to make someone feel like they were the only person in the world. People like them had mastered the unspoken language of seduction. But seduction is not simply about natural charm. It's a game, a strategy, a performance that unfolds in stages. The seducer first becomes a mirror, reflecting what the other person wants to see. They don't push or plead. They create mystery, stir curiosity, and awaken forgotten longings. They become the answer to an unspoken need. To understand this world of seduction, one had to look beyond surface attractions. Beauty, wealth, or wit might open the door, but true seduction lies in the mind, in suggestion, in the ability to pull someone into your world so gently that they don't even realize they've crossed a line. It starts with attention, subtle and playful, where the seducer makes themselves fascinating, then pulls back, only to return again, each time a little more intriguing, a little more irresistible. There were many types of seducers walking among us. Some were bold and magnetic, drawing people in with sheer energy and confidence. Others were soft and mysterious, always just out of reach, making people chase shadows and whispers. Some seducers used humor and charm, disarming their targets with laughter and ease. Others used melancholy and depth, making people feel understood in a way no one else ever had. But no matter their approach, they shared one thing: the power to awaken desire. And this desire wasn't always romantic. It was the desire to feel alive, to escape boredom, to be seen and valued. Seduction, at its core, was about offering a dream, a different reality, more exciting and fulfilling than the one someone lived in. In the beginning of this story, those who knew how to seduce weren't always the most beautiful or successful. Often, they were the ones who paid close attention, who listened more than they spoke, who noticed what others longed for but could not name. They would study their targets like an artist studies a blank canvas, searching for what color would bring it to life. These seducers would never rush. They understood timing. They knew that anticipation was more powerful than instant gratification. A glance held a promise. A pause became a question. They understood how to create a mood, to build tension, and to control the tempo of an encounter. Like a skilled dancer, they led without force, guided without pushing, and made the other person feel like it was their idea all along. And so the world spun on, full of these quiet battles and whispered invitations. The seducers lived in the in-between places, between friendship and something more, between admiration and obsession. They were the artists of the invisible, painting feelings into the hearts of others with the lightest touch. But seduction was not without its dangers, for while it could bring pleasure and power, it could also stir envy, resentment, and heartbreak. A careless seducer, one who played without care or abandoned someone too soon, could find themselves tangled in the very web they spun. For every seducer there was someone seduced, and not all were willing to let go once the spell was broken. Still, the dance continued, because deep down people craved the experience that seduction offered, the thrill of being desired, the joy of being pursued, the comfort of feeling special. It was a part of human nature, buried beneath layers of logic and duty, waiting to be stirred. And those who understood this power could reshape the world around them, not with brute strength or loud commands, but with a whisper, a smile, a perfectly timed word. They moved through life not as warriors, but as magicians, turning the ordinary into the extraordinary, the expected into the unforgettable. As our tale continues, we'll meet the different faces of seduction, each with their own strengths, their own spells, and their own flaws. But for now, rest in the knowledge that seduction is not something distant or mythical. It lives in every conversation, every touch, every moment where someone leans a little closer, drawn by a feeling they can't explain. That was the beginning. The stage was set, the game was in motion, and the most powerful force in human interaction had begun to work its magic. As the tale deepened, the world of seduction began to reveal its many colors. There wasn't just one way to enchant, no single road to influence. Seducers came in all forms, each one with a different mask, a different melody. And like actors in a grand play, they stepped onto life's stage, each playing a role shaped by personality, desire, and instinct. There was the siren, radiant and magnetic, whose very presence made hearts beat faster. She didn't have to chase or persuade. Her power came from the way she carried herself, her voice like music, her body like poetry. She was a fantasy come to life, offering escape and indulgence. Men or anyone drawn to her energy followed her, not because they were asked to, but because they couldn't imagine not doing so. She promised pleasure without words, surrender without force. Then there was the rake, bold and unashamed, his eyes full of mischief, his voice heavy with promise. He made those around him feel like they were the most important person in the world. His charm wasn't polished. It was passionate, raw, and full of desire. When he spoke of love, of longing, of fire. He didn't pretend to be innocent. He didn't need to. His energy was too intense, too alluring. He stirred the fantasies of others because he dared to express what most kept hidden. But not all seducers were so direct. Some moved like shadows, mysterious and quiet, drawing others into a fog of fascination. The coquette mastered this art. She gave just enough to keep the spark alive, then vanished just when the flame grew. Her power came from delay, from making others crave more, from saying, "not yet," instead of "yes." She stirred desire by remaining slightly out of reach, keeping her admirers restless, waiting, always unsure if they had won her heart. Others relied on softness and warmth, like the ideal lover, who became whatever the other person needed. This seducer listened deeply, studied dreams and disappointments, and then became the missing piece. They didn't seduce with grand gestures, but with understanding, showing up as the perfect partner from a fantasy long buried. People fell for them not because they dazzled, but because they understood them better than anyone else ever had. Then came the charmer, light-hearted, witty, and full of ease. They didn't seduce with mystery or passion, but with joy. They made people feel safe, accepted, and entertained. With a twinkle in their eye and a story for every moment, they swept others into a world free from worry. People wanted to be around them simply because life felt better in their company. Each type of seducer, in their own way, tapped into a universal truth. People are drawn to what they feel is missing in their lives. Boredom, loneliness, frustration, these opened the door. The seducer simply walked through it, offering the promise of something different, something better, something unforgettable. But seduction wasn't just about being a certain type. It was about recognizing what the other person yearned for and then becoming that. It was about transformation, about playing a role so well that it felt real. The most gifted seducers didn't have just one mask. They wore many. They adapted, shifting like water to fit the shape of the heart they wished to melt. And as the story unfolded, it became clear that the seduction didn't end once someone was drawn in. No, that was just the beginning. The real magic happened after the first spark, when the seducer built tension and deepened the connection. They didn't give everything at once. They created rhythms, moments of closeness followed by space, intimacy followed by absence, so desire could keep growing like a fire that refused to go out. At times they might pull away just when things felt perfect, knowing that absence made the heart ache, made the mind wander, made emotions run wild. Then, with perfect timing, they would return suddenly, sweetly reminding the other person of what they had been missing. The seducer played with time, with emotion, with the dance of uncertainty. They knew that longing was often more powerful than possession. They used the unknown as their ally, leaving just enough unsaid, just enough unseen, so that the imagination did the rest. And above all, they never begged for attention. They became the center of attention, not by force, but by becoming fascinating, unpredictable, unforgettable. They made themselves a source of delight, of challenge, of emotional movement. Whether by arousing desire, jealousy, curiosity, or admiration, they kept the heart stirred. The story of seduction was not one of dominance or demand. It was the art of subtle suggestion, of gentle control. And those who mastered it could lead others anywhere, not by dragging them, but by making them want to follow. But like every powerful tool, seduction carried risk. It had to be handled with care, with awareness, with intent. For just as quickly as one could rise in the eyes of others, one could fall if the illusion cracked too soon, or the dance turned cruel. Still, the seducers moved through the world like wind through leaves, sometimes quiet, sometimes bold, always shifting, always shaping the emotions of those around them. They understood that power didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered, and the game continued, as old as time itself. As the dance of seduction continued, the rules began to shift. It was no longer just about types or masks, it was about strategy. The seducer, now fully in motion, became a tactician. They understood that even a spark of interest could vanish if not carefully tended. And so they moved with intention, each step planned, yet disguised as effortless charm. The most important thing the seducer knew was this: people fall in love not just with others, but with feelings, how someone makes them feel, the world they create, the story they seem to be part of. And so seducers crafted atmospheres, like setting a scene in a play. They used lighting, mood, music, silence. They made their presence feel like a dream. The target would find themselves drifting, as though under a soft spell, unsure what exactly was happening, only that they didn't want it to stop. The seducer always stayed in control, but never obviously so. They didn't give orders, they made the other person want to act. They didn't beg for love, they made others feel lucky to give it. Sometimes they used jealousy, just a hint to stir a quiet storm. Other times they disappeared, not out of carelessness, but to allow space for longing to grow. And yet, seduction was never rushed. The most skilled seducers knew that speed ruined the fantasy. It wasn't about getting what they wanted. It was about making the other person want it even more. They planted seeds of desire and waited patiently for them to bloom. One step at a time, the connection deepened through touch, through gaze, through suggestion. The target never quite knew where they stood, and that made everything more intoxicating. But the seducer was not without obstacles. Many people guarded their hearts. They had been hurt before. They doubted, resisted, questioned. The seducer welcomed this. Resistance was not a wall. It was an invitation to be clever, to be creative. They never pushed too hard. They smiled through rejection, stepped back with elegance, then found another path in. They could also use contrast to heighten emotion, being playful one moment, distant the next. This shift created confusion, which in turn created focus. The mind seeks answers, and the seducer offered only riddles. The heart seeks comfort, and the seducer offered glimpses. It was a game of giving just enough and never too much. Sometimes they used words, not grand speeches, but little lines that lingered, a whispered compliment, a surprising observation, a question that no one had ever asked before. Other times they said nothing at all, letting their silence say more than words ever could. Seduction was not always sweet. It could be dark, too. There were those who used fear, sadness, or drama to stir deeper emotions. A tear at the right moment, a story of heartbreak, a look of pain, It could make someone feel protective, connected, and emotionally entangled. People are drawn to those they think they can heal, or those who reflect their own hidden wounds. But this had to be used with care. If overdone, it became manipulation. If real emotion was faked, it risked breaking the spell forever. The true seducer balanced light and shadow, never going too far in either direction. They could make someone feel needed without being needy, admired without demanding admiration. The target of seduction, meanwhile, often felt like they were the one in control. They made the first move. They asked the questions. They took the risk. And yet it was the seducer who had led them to each of those steps, who had opened just the right doors at just the right time. The seducer offered freedom, but always within invisible boundaries. As the relationship deepened, the seducer's greatest challenge was to maintain interest. People grow used to things, even beautiful things, and so the seducer had to stay fluid, changing their colors like a chameleon, becoming new again and again. They had to surprise, to shift, to bring something fresh each time the flame began to dim. And when the moment finally came, when the target was fully drawn in, when the dance reached its peak, the seducer did not gloat or boast. They allowed the other person to feel they had chosen this path themselves, that it was destiny, that the dream had been their own all along. But here's a truth that often goes unspoken. Seduction doesn't always end with conquest. Sometimes it ends with heartbreak. The seducer may grow bored. The target may become clingy. The fantasy may fade. This is the price of the game. That which burns bright often burns fast. And so the wisest seducers knew when to retreat, when to leave before love soured, when to end things while still desired. And sometimes, rarely but powerfully, the seducer would find themselves seduced. For no matter how skilled, they too had hearts. And when two true artists of emotion met, the dance became a whirlwind, a storm of shared seduction, where neither knew who was leading, and both lost themselves in the enchantment. So the story unfolded, full of twists and turns, longing and mystery. Seduction was not a straight path, but a spiral. It circled and curved, rose and fell, like the beating of a heart caught between hope and uncertainty. And as night fell, the world slept beneath this timeless spell. Somewhere a glance was exchanged. Somewhere else a heart stirred. The game never truly ended. It simply paused, waiting for the next moment, the next spark, the next story. Now, as the moonlight deepened and the air grew still, the story entered its most delicate chapter. Seduction by now had taken root. Feelings had bloomed, but so had vulnerability. This was the moment where many faltered, where desire, once burning and bright, could fade into comfort, and where a dream, if not carefully guarded, could turn into routine. But the true seducer knew the danger of familiarity. They understood that once someone feels they've fully figured you out, they begin to drift. And so the seducer became a master of reinvention. Just when the other person thought they had you, you changed subtly, mysteriously, beautifully. A new interest, a shift in energy, a small distance created curiosity. You remained familiar, but not predictable. That tension between closeness and mystery kept the flame alive. Some would take this moment to withdraw entirely, only to return later, cloaked in silence and surprise. Others would shift their tone, becoming more playful, more elusive, even a little dangerous, It wasn't cruelty, it was movement. It was reminding the other person that the dance was still going, that the music hadn't ended. But seduction at this stage wasn't just about charm. It was about emotion. People, once deeply involved, began to look for meaning. They wanted connection, not just excitement. And the seducer had to give them something that felt true. A glimpse behind the mask, a shared vulnerability, a moment of softness. It had to feel real, because it was real. You see, seducers were not just manipulators of feeling. They were, in some way, artists of love. And like all great art, seduction required a touch of truth, a brush of sincerity. You couldn't fake everything, or the illusion would crack. The most powerful seductions were the ones where both people were caught up in the spell, where lines blurred and the game became a shared fantasy, but still, danger lurked. When people fall deeply, they become attached, possessive, even dependent. The seducer had to tread carefully now, balancing the desire they had stirred with the need to stay free. If they gave too much, they became ordinary. If they took too much, they became cruel. The key was in balance, offering emotion, but never all of it. Giving time, but not every moment. Showing care without becoming consumed. In this phase, the seducer might use drama. Not fights, but moments of tension, of emotional uncertainty. These weren't meant to wound, but to awaken. A hint of jealousy, a sudden coldness, a change in rhythm. Each one stirred feeling made the other person feel the fragility of the connection. And in that fragile space, emotions deepened. But there was also joy, laughter, surprises, passion. The seducer never let the story turn into a struggle. They made their target feel alive, adored, and endlessly fascinated. Every moment together was a scene and a story too good to put down. And that story had twists, letters written and not sent, gifts left without a name, sudden disappearances followed by even more dramatic returns. And still the seducer listened, deeply. They understood that seduction wasn't just about what you gave, it was about what you noticed. What someone longed for, feared, resented, dreamed of. The seducer became the answer to those feelings, the resolution to inner tensions. They didn't fix people, but they made them feel understood. And that was its own kind of magic. Some seducers, with time, would become mentors. Not in the literal sense, but in energy. They offered guidance, wisdom, insight like a light in the dark. Their presence elevated others, made them feel capable, special, chosen, and yet they never asked to be worshipped. They remained humble, even as they became unforgettable. Others seduced through contradiction. They might be soft, then stern, innocent, then bold. Their complexity made them fascinating. They weren't easy to label, and that was the point. The mind couldn't settle, and the heart kept chasing. The seducer wasn't a puzzle to be solved. They were a mystery to be experienced. And finally, as the connection reached its most intense point, something strange would happen. The one who was seduced often began to reflect the seducer. They picked up on their phrases, their style, their rhythm. They adapted, mirrored, even transformed. That was the final sign the seduction was complete. The dream had taken hold. But not every seduction ended with a lasting bond. Sometimes, once the spell had served its purpose, the seducer stepped away. Not with cruelty, but with a sense of timing. They knew that the most beautiful things are those that end before they wilt. So they withdrew like mist at dawn, leaving behind memories like perfume soft, lingering, and impossible to forget. In other cases, they stayed, not as seducers anymore, but as something else, a partner, a muse, a friend. For even the greatest artists sometimes choose to retire their brush, not out of loss, but because the masterpiece was complete. And so the night went on. Somewhere someone was falling under a spell. Somewhere else someone was casting one. And in the air between them the old rhythm played on a rhythm made not of music, but of glances, of silences, of stories half told and fully felt. Oh, the story came toward its end, but the art itself never did. Seduction, it turned out, was not something that began and ended. It was a way of moving through the world, of connecting, of creating emotion with grace and intention. It wasn't reserved for lovers or romantic intrigues. It could be used in friendship, leadership, creativity, even in silence. It was the quiet power behind so much of what made people feel drawn to one another, without knowing exactly why. The greatest seducers, those remembered long after they left the room, were never loud. They were never desperate. They were captivating because they made others feel seen, inspired, and alive. They didn't compete. They created. They didn't chase. They attracted. They didn't push. They pulled gently, with subtlety, with understanding. But they also carried something deeper, a sense of detachment. Not coldness, but freedom. They loved the game, but they didn't need it. That made them all the more powerful. The moment someone needs to be desired, they lose control. The seducer, on the other hand, remains self-contained. Their confidence doesn't come from how many they can win. It comes from knowing they don't have to win at all. That's why the most dangerous seducers were often the least obvious. They didn't wear bright colors or use flashy words. Instead, they simply understood people. They understood how to light a spark in someone's heart and then let it burn on its own. Their power came not from performance but from presence. They knew when to speak and when to pause, when to reveal and when to disappear. Over time, they mastered more than just the outer dance. They understood the inner one too. They saw that people are often searching for someone who makes them feel something: joy, longing, mystery, wonder. The seducer became the mirror, the canvas, the dream that person needed. They didn't become someone else. They became more of themselves, tuned to a frequency the other could hear. They also knew how to protect themselves. For not everyone who is drawn to you comes with good intentions. Some carry obsession, others control. Some seek to consume rather than connect. And so the seducer stayed light on their feet, always able to step away, to vanish, to preserve their freedom. They knew when the game was healthy and when it had turned dark. In the end, seduction was about emotion. That was the secret. It wasn't about tricks or traps. It was about creating a feeling so strong, so vivid, that someone couldn't help but be pulled toward it. Whether that feeling was warmth, mystery, danger, or delight depended on the moment, the mood, the person. But whatever it was, the seducer delivered it with elegance. There were those who misused the art, of course, who turned seduction into manipulation, who lied, who used hearts like coins, who left others broken and bitter. They may have succeeded for a time, but their power faded, because true seduction is not built on cruelty. It is built on sensitivity, on timing, on emotional intelligence. A seducer who cannot feel cannot truly seduce. They may dominate, but they cannot enchant. And so the wise seducer walked a careful path. They never promised what they couldn't give. They never stirred emotion for no reason. They understood that their power came with responsibility, that to awaken desire in someone else meant becoming a part of their story, and stories, once begun, cannot be taken back. As the tale closed, the art remained, not as a set of rules, but as a way of seeing. The world, to a seducer, was alive with signals, with colors, with feeling. Every word could open a door. Every look could begin a story. Every moment could be shaped, softened, transformed. And perhaps that is the greatest secret of all. Seduction is not about pretending to be someone else. It's about learning to be deeply present, to listen, to notice, to respond with intention rather than habit. It's about slowing down long enough to see the hidden desires in others and in yourself. It's about creating moments that people remember long after you're gone. So if ever you find yourself wanting to move someone not with force but with feeling, remember this story. Remember the dance. Move slowly, speak softly, feel deeply, and above all, be the kind of presence that people long to be near, even if they don't know why, because in a world that is often loud and fast, the one who whispers beauty into the silence is the one who will be remembered. And just like that, the curtain falls on this quiet tale. But the music still plays, soft and eternal, in the hearts of those who understand its rhythm. Sleep well, now the art is alive within you. Thank you for joining me on this mindful journey through words and wisdom. If this story brought you insight, calm, or inspiration, please like, subscribe, and share so we can continue exploring together.